Every mystery leaves a trace, a clue, a rumor, a piece of evidence history forgot to explain. This is the Enigma Files, where every story is true, every theory is on the table, and nothing is ever fully closed.
Exciting. So,
yeah,
just a little for folks who will listen to this, just so they kind of know where we're coming at this. We're going to have fun. We're going to share some theories on some crazy stories. We haven't talked, so that's going to be our process going forward. We're not going to share what we think with each other on these topics until we get to the end. So you don't know my theories going in. I don't know yours.
No.
So that'll make it for some fun. And we're just going to go through and just try to find some crazy historical topics that sound interesting. I mean, for me, I'm a history nerd, so I love this sort of thing. I know we've talked.
Yeah, I'm also a conspiracy theory buff. For those listening at home, my tinfoil hat is on, and I'm ready to go.
Awesome. And you know, we're going to, some of these theories that as we go through these, some of these will be pretty conspiracy heavy. Some of them are a little more founded in, not so much that outlandish, and not every conspiracy is outlandish, but some of them can be. So,
no,
it's not always lizard people. It's not always aliens. So we'll just get that out of the way.
What about Bigfoot?
Bigfoot is always on the table. So, you never know. And I think this week's topic that we're going to, the mystery we're going to dive into is appropriate. It's Edgar Allan Poe's death. We're a few days before Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
You think Halloween? Classic American writer. I mean, he is the ultimate writer. When I was back in college, I had to take a literature class, and Poe was one of the guys we had to study. The Raven, or for Simpsons fans, Treehouse of Horror. Yeah. There's the whole episode. So just a little insider, Paul and I are old school Simpsons fans. And so that one, I can still see that episode, Homer coming in. But you talk about a guy that had an impact for, centuries now. We're going on almost 150 years, if not more. So, and how Fall of the House of Usher, all that stuff is Edgar Allan Poe. So what a perfect guy for Halloween. But I don't know about you. Like, my kids are still into Halloween. I don't know. Yours, truth be told, I know they're a little older. I don't know if Halloween's a big deal still in your house or not.
It still is a little bit. It's more they like to just go in our old neighborhood where their friends are and just kind of go around and get some candy. I'm going to guess probably in the next couple of years here, they'll be too old to do that kind of stuff. So, but I'm still living it up while I can. We'll go have a bonfire at the house of the friends, and we'll just hang out with their parents and, have a good time, pass out candy.
And we do the same thing with mine. Mine are a few years younger than yours, and they're still doing the dress up. We'll still have the family come over. Nothing. We don't do anything too creepy. So, truth be told, we're not into the really crazy costumes. My kids keep it very tame. It is funny to me though that for 364 days of the year we tell our kids don't take candy from strangers, and then we're going to wander around at night in masks and knock on people's doors and take candy from strangers. It's great, but But again, it's Halloween, and so don't go down the whole rabbit hole of crazy things that go with it. But I think this story is going to be perfect. I think you're going to enjoy it. It's got a bunch of twists and turns. So let's jump into it and kind of go over, give you the info on Edgar Allan Poe. So we're going to start 1849. Poe is living in New York with Mrs. Clem. It's actually his mother-in-law, as well as he married his cousin. I mean, talk about different times.
I was just going to say different times.
Yes, and his wife, Virginia, had just died in 1847, so he's not that far along of you know, being widowed. Um, so it's January 29th. He's on this lecture tour. He's trying to raise money for a magazine that he's building called The Stylus. So he's on this tour. He's going Philadelphia to Richmond to Norfolk. He's in Richmond and he runs into his childhood sweetheart, Almira Shelton. You got to love some of those names from the past. And they hit it off. They're both widowed. And there's a little, information gets a little foggy on this, but some say that he proposes to her. Some say they're just in a courtship, but he finds her and he's in a better place in his life because of that. People are saying. So he leaves for New York. They're gathering their belongings and he's off. And he's actually going to end up in Baltimore. And things get weird here because there's about a week span that he's unaccounted for. So from the time that he leaves Richmond and gets to Baltimore, there's no one sees him. So I think that's a good thing that as you're listening to all this, keep that in mind, that there's this time period where a pretty famous guy is gone. So he gets there, he's in Baltimore. His cousin Nelson Poe writes back to his mother-in-law that Poe spent some time there, but it's again weird. He doesn't know where he's gone to. He kind of just disappears. But he suddenly shows up, of all places, he shows up in front of a tavern. It's October the 3rd. He's delirious. It's Ryan's Tavern. You sometimes hear it called Gunner's Hall. It's also used as a polling place. So there's an election going on in Baltimore. So even though it says tavern, it's a multi-facet location. They find him in the street, and there's a printer by the name of Joseph W. Walker who finds him, and he sends a letter to a Joseph Snodgrass. Again, you got to love some of these names. An acquaintance of Poe, and he writes this letter to him, and he says, "Dear Sir, there's a gentleman rather the worse for wear at Ryan's 4th Ward polls." Again, remember, Ryan's Tavern, also a polling place, who goes under the name of Edgar A. Poe and appears in great distress. He says he is acquainted with you, and I assure you he is in a need of immediate assistance. So Snodgrass gets this letter, rushes over, and says, and this just gives you an idea, quote, Poe was in a state of beastly intoxication. This is his description of what he sees. And then he says that Poe's appearance was repulsive. He had unkempt hair, his face wasn't washed, vacant eyes, and he describes his clothing as dirty, unpolished shoes, and they didn't fit well. He actually says, and I love this word, he uses the word, his pantaloons did not fit right. Anytime you can work in the word pantaloons into a recount, we're going to do it. So,
Yeah, right.
anything stand out to you, Paul? I mean, as we're going through this, as he finds them.
Yeah. So, I mean, how many people today would actually vote if it was in the local tavern?
Turnout might be a little bit higher.
Which one of the things in some of my research, and it will kind of go into one of the theories here, was that they would actually offer a beer after you voted. So, maybe it was a way to try to get people to come in to vote. But yeah, and also in some of my research, I saw that it was very uncommon for Poe to go out in public not looking. He was a celebrity, so he was always looking nice, wearing very nice clothes, always had his hair done nicely. So it is very weird that he would be found like this in these raggedy clothes, smells like he has, and you said, like you said, there's been a week of time, so who knows when he's been able to shower or whatever. Um, but yeah.
And it's the 1800s, so I don't know how much they're actually showering to begin with. But I mean, they always said that he went out in a suit.
Mhm.
He always had a cane. None of this is found. So as we go through this, they never find his. He's traveling. They never find his trunk. They never find the things he travels with. They just find him in these somebody else's clothes. Is
Mhm.
what they find him in, and it's just weird. And they try to kind of question him, and he's never coherent enough to explain what's going on. So they call to his attending physician, easy for me to say, and
Mhm.
it's a John Joseph Moran. Um, and his account of how Poe looked is similar to what Snodgrass said. You know, stained, faded clothes, old straw hat. His shoes looked like the heels had been run down. It's just a weird attire, and they even say, you know, they point out these clothes were so out of character for him.
Mhm.
So Moran, who's his physician, says we got to get him to the hospital. They send him to Washington College Hospital, um, and when he gets there, he's confined. They say it's a prison like room, barred windows. It was basically a section that was reserved for drunks. They basically put him in the hospital drunk tank, thinking that he's so massively intoxicated, which also means now he doesn't get visitors. Um, while he's there, as if things aren't weird enough, he starts calling out the name Reynolds. Um, and this starts on the night before his death. They have no idea who Reynolds is. No one's ever been able to identify him. In fact, there's there's even some contention on if that's even what he was saying because he was so incoherent. Um, they just don't know. They said one of the things he could have been saying instead of Reynolds, because you know these two things are going to sound so much like herring, Herring. So I think it gives you an idea of his speech is probably massively slurred. I mean, if you're getting Reynolds and Herring so confused, um, it's bizarre. Um, but this goes on, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. You know, Dr. Moran's trying to cheer him up in the few times that Poe's awake. Um, you know, he even told him he would soon be enjoying the company of his old friends. And Poe supposedly replies, the best thing his friend could do would be to, quote, blow out his brains with a pistol. So this is a guy who's obviously going through something, right? And this is where it gets really tough because, and I'm sure, Paul, maybe you come across this on your research, and if you had, jump in. Poe was one of these guys that always, when you research him, some people just said he always just had kind of this dark presence about him.
Mhm.
There's been, you know, accusations that he was a drunk, but then there's folks who say he really didn't drink more than anybody else. He was always sickly. Eh, he was just a small guy. So I think it depended on the lens that you looked through it. But you know, I don't know if this quote is out of context. This is a guy who wrote some pretty dark things. So was he just being poetic, or was this just his friend? As we'll discuss here later on, they were making money off of his death. Some of these guys were making money.
Yeah.
So, you know, I I don't know. But, you know, in his distressed state, Poe starts asking, he makes references to a wife in Richmond. They think he could have been delusional, talking about Virginia, thinking that maybe she was alive. Or they said maybe he was referring to the Sarah Elmira Royster, who he had met, his you know sweetheart, who
Mhm.
some think he had recently proposed to. They're not sure. Um, but on October 7th, 1849, Poe dies. And Dr. Moran says his last words were, Lord help my poor soul. At least that's what Moran says. But this is where it gets really weird because Moran, probably not the most credible guy. And we'll jump into that in 1 second. But again, this is just a weird story. You got the celebrity who's disappeared for 7 days, not making any sense. Somebody else's clothes, locked in a drunk tank, calling names, maybe talking about getting this. The best thing is to blow his head off. It's just weird, and I can't help but think like today, you would have, besides a doctor, it's a celebrity. You would have had police investigate. Like none of that's going on. Like
No.
nobody's trying to figure out like why is he in somebody else's clothes? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Where's
know,
he been for the last week?
and clearly they know that because he's got a family member who's like, I knew he was here, but I don't know where he went.
Hmm.
So something to me like this is to your point earlier about conspiracy theories. Oh my gosh, does this open the door for all sorts of
Oh
wild
yeah. I mean,
theories?
today you would have whole podcasts about all the conspiracies and how it was an assassin or whatever. Yeah. This is weird.
And it gets even weirder because Moran was, they say, was probably, other than maybe a nurse or two, the only person to see Poe in his last few days. Um, and his credibility just starts getting questioned almost immediately. Um, I would say the guy's a liar to some degree, and we're going to go through because over the years, his story changes every time he writes something or, surprise, goes on a lecture tour about this because
Yeah.
it's a celebrity, so he's trying to make money. Um, the first one he claimed is in 1875 and then again in 1885 that he had immediately contacted Poe's aunt and mother-in-law, because again, same person,
Right.
Maria Clem, to let her know about Poe's death. In fact, it comes out he only wrote her after she had requested it on November 9th. The guy died on October 7th. So like
Weird.
4 weeks go by. Um, he also claimed that Poe had said, again, last words, completely different. This is such a weird quote. The arched heavens encompass me, and God has his decree legibly written upon the frontlets of every created human being, and demons incarnate. Their goal will be the seething waves of blank despair.
Maybe he thought "Lord help my poor soul" wasn't good enough for
Like,
a literary genius, and thought he needed to church it up a little bit.
right, but like, you've gone in such a huge, to your point, like, hey, this guy wrote all these things, quote the Raven nevermore, this just doesn't quite fit. So let's give him some like dark and brooding last words. But again, other than to make money and to really prop yourself up, there's no reason to do this, especially since there's record of other things. Um, in fact, there's a New York Herald article that's published, and the writer admitted, we cannot imagine Poe, even if delirious, constructing such sentences. So they're even telling you, like, this is crazy. This is out of character. Um, in fact, one of Poe's biographers, William Bittner, even says um, he was probably just trying to put, I like this quote, pious last words to console the mourners.
Yeah.
Church it up, which is such a great way to put it. But then, as if that wasn't weird enough, Moran starts changing the timeline. So he claims at one point Poe was brought into the hospital on October 3rd at 5 p.m. Then on October 6th at 9 a.m. he was brought in. And no. It was October 7th, the day he died, at 10 o'clock in the afternoon. Um, Again, why you would make this up when clearly the guy was in the hospital for multiple days? Why would you make up that, he came in on the 7th, the day that he died? So what you're telling me is you only saw him for a couple hours? It's
Yeah.
weird. It's bizarre. Um, And then he would claim that he has the hospital records to back it up. And of course, if you're going to tell the press that there's something there to find, they're going to go looking. And they go looking and they don't find anything. There's, up to a century later, nothing on the death certificate. There's actually not even really an official death certificate. The only thing they had put on there was that he had died from basically being a drunk, but there was no other really cause of death. But the weird part was there's even contradictions on smelling alcohol on him when they brought him into the hospital. Because there were
Mm-hmm.
ones that were saying, we don't smell anything on the guy. He doesn't smell like alcohol. But they treated him like he was a drunk. So it gets weird. There's no record. There's no autopsy. There's nothing found in the hospital record. So Moran going, go ahead and double check me. There's nothing there. And then people tried to write it off as, well, he was older. Moran was older. It was a lapse in memory. He wanted to romanticize things. We don't know. The last time he really said anything about this was in 1885, and Moran was 65 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But every time he said something, it changed. So right there, you got to call things into question when your own doctor can't get it straight, and he's giving you different stories.
Yeah, if you're telling the truth, it should always at least be very close to the same story every time. I mean, yeah, you might maybe misremember a detail or two, but it should always be a very similar narrative every time. But every time he told the story, it was more elaborate, more, and it's weird that he held back information that, should have been out there, that the autopsy wasn't really done. And they just said it was congestion of the brain, which was when you died from being drunk, that's what they called it. So it not everything is piecing together with this doctor.
No, and so again, you think today there would have been some sort of inquiry. You would have had, especially when he's out here making these claims, go check the records, and there's no records. Because
Mm-hmm.
there's even a note that I have here that says they're not even sure the records even existed to be lost.
Yeah,
So this guy may not have even written anything down. And again, was it some, nefarious plot? Or was he going, this guy's famous, I'm going to try to protect him because he looks like he's done something. And I don't want to ruin. It could have been something as innocent as that. We don't know.
maybe.
But it's awfully weird when your story starts changing when you're on lecture tours and you're doing writings because
Yeah.
you're getting paid.
Yeah.
You're
And you're
getting paid
making
for those
money
things.
off of his death.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. There's just so many things where you would have had an investigation. But this is where it gets really weird because we're going to jump into these, these ideas of the theories of what causes death. And man, like, it just gets weird because nobody can really agree on even that. And, the first one that comes up is, was alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we've always been taught through history, if you've ever heard of Poe, is he was a drunk. Here's the thing. Nobody comes out and says that. They say he went through bouts when he was drinking heavily. The guy's wife died, and he wrote pretty creepy, dark stories. But then he would snap out of it. And part of it comes from this crazy thing where Snodgrass, his friend, remember, who's the one that rushes to the scene when he gets the
Mm-hmm.
letter in front of the bar, he was convinced that Poe died from alcoholism. And he actually worked hard to popularize the theory. Because the
Right.
thing about Snodgrass was he was part of the temperance movement. And the temperance movement was you
Yes.
refrain from alcohol.
Yeah. No alcohol. So he wanted to use it as this is why you shouldn't drink. Now, on that alcohol, in my research, I had stumbled across something that Poe had this genetic condition that even like like a sip of alcohol, he could become deathly ill. So which I think in that theory, if he was drinking, even if he just had a small amount of alcohol, which you might not be able to notice on someone's breath, but you know, that could be part of what caused the death, because if he did have this, and in my research, it said that it was something that's passed down in your genetics. So possibly his father or his mother had a similar, and which is why he was really, and I was reading that he was kind of getting into this temperance movement as well. And that was part of the reason, is because of this genetic condition that he had to alcohol.
Exactly. And I think what doesn't help is when he dies, he has this tiny funeral. I think like 10
Mm.
people they said showed up. He's buried in an unmarked grave. And then of all the things, they go and they have his obituary written by this guy that didn't like him. A literary
Yeah,
a literary uh rival. And
right.
he writes in it that Poe died from alcoholism. He was a drunk, he was a horrible drunk, and he stood by it. So, like it's crazy because like why again, if you really want to present this, there you go. You get it
Yeah.
out there. But to your point, there's really no proof that he did that. They're not sure. And
Hmm.
even explain it. Let's say it was alcohol. There's really no explanation as to why. They did say during Virginia's illness, he did drink. His wife's dying.
Hmm.
You know,
Understandable.
understandable. Um, they it's just never truly explained. So for me, the alcohol theory just doesn't hold water. Like I just don't see it. I mean, the guy was supposedly engaged, or in the very least, met his childhood sweetheart. They're getting back together. He's got a lot to be happy about. And to your
Hmm.
point, my research said the same thing. He was leaning towards the temperance movement, maybe not all the way, but he really wasn't drinking heavily. And I think it's one of these things where, history is written by the people that are still there. Poe wasn't there to
Hmm.
defend himself. So, same way that Dr. Moran was using Poe to make money on these traveling circuits, Snodgrass is using him to further his movement. That's my opinion. I don't think there's anything there with the alcohol. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
what your thought
Which
is on that.
it's really weird that he had no one living that would like come to his defense. Even his friend is using his death to further his own agenda. That's so weird. I would not say that I think that the alcohol alone would be the cause, like for all the same reasons that you brought up. I don't think that that would be what he would do to himself. And like you said, he seemed to be in a good place, and it really didn't make sense that that would be the sole cause of death.
And Moran of all people, Dr. Moran of all people, comes out. Um, I think it was from 1874 in one of his writings. Again, take this with a grain of salt. It's Moran.
Hmm.
He actually says that he didn't believe. He says, "quote I have stated to you the fact that Edgar Allan Poe did not die under the effect of any intoxicant, nor the smell of liquor upon his breath or person." Again, remember, this is a guy that's been lying, could have been lying again to protect
Yeah.
him. Um, there is a friend of Moran. It's actually a Reverend W.T.D. Clem, wrote to Elmer Reynolds and says, "Allow me to say that this remarkable statement of Dr. Moran confuses and surprises me because it positively contradicts the statement made to me personally by the doctor, and surprises me because he did not years ago give to the public what he now asserts to be the true cause of Mr. Poe's death." So take it for what it's worth. I agree with you. I don't think it was alcohol. I think that's a pretty far fetched thing, where it was only alcohol and that was it. He died of,
Mm.
I mean, but again, if you had hospital records, this one goes away pretty quickly. We don't have them. Um,
I mean,
so
today they would do a blood test and, be able to find all of that. That's the other thing is this is so long ago and medicine was so different back then. They were still telling you that it was good to smoke cigarettes when you were pregnant. So,
right,
uh, you know, so yeah, it's
it just
yeah,
doesn't. Again, to me, on its face by itself, just doesn't work. Um,
no, I agree.
then there was this whole thing about disease, like that he could have had different diseases. One of my favorites is rabies that they throw out there because I got to be honest, and you're laughing because I think you know where I always think of the so moment of behind the curtain. I know Paul loves this show too, The Office. There's that great episode.
That's exactly what we got the fun run for the cure.
Right, right. Meredith getting hit by the car saves her life because she has rabies. Because one of the things that they said is Poe kept pets.
Yeah.
Plus, it's the 1800s. There's rats. There's crazy things out there. But he liked pets. Could one of them have bit him, given him rabies? Supposedly, he had a fear of water, which is, one of the effects of rabies. But again, we don't have an autopsy report to say if there's a bite. Supposedly,
Mhm.
they didn't see anything on him. So to me, that's a big stretch. I mean, if the guy's got an illness like rabies, what's he doing traveling around, you know, on a magazine tour? Number one, and then number two, still doesn't explain how he ends up in somebody else's clothes.
I was just gonna say that part isn't explained with the rabies theory. Um, that how is he in these shoes and clothes that are not his?
It does it again. It doesn't tie up, doesn't put a bow on this and tie it up neatly. It just doesn't. They said it could have been cholera. They go through all these different things. None of them really stick, other than the fact that the guy just was always kind of a sickly looking person.
Mhm.
Um, I'm you saw some of the pictures, and folks go Google him. He's not. He doesn't look like he was, gonna get a clean bill of health regardless of what was going on. I mean, he wasn't the most
No.
healthy looking guy. Um, in fact, to me, when I see pictures of him, I'm like, man, you look like somebody that would be a character out of one of your books. So he was I mean, he was a frail looking guy. But does that
Yeah.
equal a disease that equals him dying in a street in front of a polling place bar in somebody else's clothes? To me,
No, none of the disease theories to me, the clothes are the big question that hangs on any of those theories.
and again, you keep getting these weird reports from people. So, like, there was
Mhm.
a Mrs. Shew, Shew, who says, I seem to remember that he had a scar or some sort of wound on his left shoulder. Um, she was helping him change his clothes while he was ill. And she said only Virginia, his wife, would have known about it. His mother in law didn't. And she said, I asked him if it had hurt in the region of the heart, and he told me yes. And his head also hurt. Again, this is the only person that says this. Uh,
Mhm.
does it just tie into the fact that the guy was just a sickly guy? Again,
Maybe.
could have been part of the death, but I don't think it addresses anything. They even said, could he have had diabetes, epilepsy? They go through all these things. In fact, you get some modern day um, doctors who even looked at. I mean, we're going into even the 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. One person says, he was offered water and he always drank it with difficulty, so it must have been rabies.
Mhm.
there's just a lot of speculation. And again, it feels like when there's a lack of information, what always happens, we fill in the gaps. So to me, illness, I don't think, could there have been something underlying there? Sure, he could have had something. Then the events just made worse, but I don't think it was the sole cause. I, again,
No.
I think we're in agreement on that one as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's this one that's interesting: cooping, cooping. He was not into
Yeah.
chickens. This was
No.
actually, because you hear it and you're like, oh, must be the rabies thing.
Yeah. You think, oh, yeah, something with chickens.
It's not. So this was basically a way to fix an election in the 1800s.
Hey,
What?
the more things change, the more they stay the same, right?
Right? Right? People were always trying to look to win, politics in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one is basically gangsters, mobsters, criminals. They would grab somebody off the street and they would take them to a room called a coop, and they would force alcohol into them or some other substance, beat them up potentially, and force them to go in to vote in the polling places. They would go vote, they'd pull them back out, they'd put them back in the coop, they'd change their clothes, they'd send them back in again and have them vote again. And they would do this multiple times until basically the person passed out and was of no use to them anymore. Man, this one is interesting to me. Now, here's the problem. We don't have any record of, was he beat up? We don't know.
Hmm.
Again, missing records. Nobody says, hey, the guy was bruised. We have contradictions on, did he smell like alcohol? But he's out of his mind. He's incoherent.
Hmm.
So here's why I like this one a lot. It checks a lot of boxes. It tells you
It
why he would
does.
be
It
wearing
really does.
somebody else's clothes, why he
And
would be
outside of a polling place.
outside of a polling place, whacked out of his mind, crazy. Um, I think this one you go through and you check some things. It just starts to make a lot of sense. But again, contradictions. Nobody really with a good record of telling the truth comes out and says he was beat up, or that he smelled like alcohol, or that he was this, or that he was that. The only thing they agreed on is his clothes were weird and he wasn't making sense.
Yeah.
Um,
And if the doctor was trying to cover for him, that could be a reason he looked beat up, that type of thing. Maybe if if the doctor is covering for this celebrity to make him look better than what it was, that could be a very valid reason why he didn't talk about maybe bruising or it looked like he was beat up or that type of thing.
but you made a good point. The celebrity is one of the big holes that I poke in this theory. He was recognizable. So why would you kidnap a guy to use him to vote multiple times when people would have recognized him? That's the part of this one that I go, that's weird. Because he is a
Yeah.
celebrity. They would have known who he's. I mean, we know who he is even today. If you're a football fan, Baltimore Ravens, that came from Poe. Like,
Yeah.
it, even today we know who he is, much less when he's actively writing. That's my only issue with this one is,
Well, I'm going to poke a hole in that because
yeah,
I think we're also thinking in the lens of uh, the 20th, 21st century where celebrities are everywhere. Would everyone have known what he looked like? Would it have been as commonly known? I mean, now people who read his work or maybe went to hear him lecture or things like that would definitely know. But would the common man know if they saw Edgar Allan Poe walking down the street? Would they go, "Oh, that's Edgar Allan Poe"?
yeah. And that to me is an awesome point because we don't know, right? We don't know. I'm not sure either how much the average Joe on the street would have recognized him. So
Mhm.
again, to your point, that is a plus in the column of this. I love this. This N.H. Morrison wrote a letter in 1874 that said the story of Poe's death has never been told, and then he says Poe has all the facts, but I'm afraid may not be willing to tell them, which is a nice way of saying he can't. He's the only one that truly knows what goes on. Um, this cooping thing, Baltimore, and doing research is man, it's corrupt at this time. This went on. I think this was one that maybe should have gotten a little more of a look at because if he did die from this, it was a murder. Um, so again, there is a conspiracy theory that it was a murder, and I would say if it falls under cooping, you got a reason for that conspiracy to have some legs. Um, it checks so many boxes. It just truly checks a lot of boxes. Um, so I think there is something there to it. So I don't know, what where you fall on this one. This is one that I'm super
This
intrigued.
is one in the possible. Yeah, this is the possibility uh, stack. It definitely, like you said, it checks a lot of the boxes. I think it's plausible, right? That's really, I think in the end we'll never really know, but it's definitely plausible.
And you get into some crazy ones. So here's the conspiracy ones, and I love these mostly because I don't think any of these hold any weight. Um, there was one that said that he faked his own death to grow his fame, like he was Elvis. Um, I don't. There's no way. Like I don't see that happening. Where that happened, but that was one theory. Um, Another one was that there's this great story, and I think we're going to get into this one on a later episode, where he wrote these documents called the Beale Papers, which was
Mm.
about a whole treasure hunt. Except there's an issue; those weren't published until 1885. He was already long dead. Um, you know, I think this is a case of when you can't explain something, you try to explain it in
Mhm.
whatever way you can. And I don't think faking his own death, I don't think, trying to
No.
expand his his fame. If you're gonna fake your own death to expand your own fame, wouldn't you at some point come back and go, "Hi, I'm still alive"? That would have made you even more famous
Yeah, I mean,
because it's
but
too good of a
we're
story for a
still
writer.
we're still doing that. How many times have you heard Tupac is still alive and he's on some island somewhere, and
Right.
that's why all this music is still coming out. I mean, we're still doing the same thing. When you can't explain it,
Or
you come up with these conspiracies.
if you're a Men in Black fan of the movie, Elvis didn't die; he just went home.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
exactly, exactly.
that's why the National Enquirer sells. Truckers seen in Tennessee, and it's Elvis, or
Yeah,
whatever it is.
exactly.
I don't think these conspiracies in this case are so far out there. I don't see any of those stacking up.
No.
Um, so those are the ones that I've got. I mean, in your research, what did you find any other ones
So
that
yeah,
you think were
like
plausible?
carbon monoxide. Well, I found one, carbon monoxide poisoning, and they kind of talked about like the gas lighting in that era. They used gas lights, but if there was an issue with that, wouldn't there have been reports of other people also being affected by carbon monoxide. You would think that the papers or something would have been reported on that. So to me, I was like, no, I don't think that that one is one. Or the brain tumor. That was another one I had um, had. But now, I mean, not to get dark, but I have actually had a family member have brain cancer, and you know, you're when you're at the time of death, you're
Me
not
as well.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not going to Baltimore and traveling. I mean, you're very sick,
Right.
and so I threw that one out too.
And again, doesn't explain the clothes, doesn't explain the missing
Yeah,
trunk, doesn't explain the missing items, doesn't explain the week that he disappeared. Like, none of that explains the weird things that went on. And again, are they really weird? Or are they only weird now because you're looking back trying to fill in the blanks because you don't have enough information?
right.
That's the tough part. But carbon monoxide doesn't explain why you're in somebody else's clothes.
No,
Maybe a brain tumor does, because I'm not thinking clearly and I'm not able to keep
right.
myself. But again, to your point, I've seen it with a family member. They weren't getting out of bed, much less get on a train and travel. So nothing really seems to check the boxes completely. Um, which I'll share my thought. I'll share my theory.
Yeah,
I think it's a combination of a few things, and I think it explains the week and the clothes and everything else. I think he was a victim of cooping, which would explain the week that he was missing because he was kidnapped by these guys. To your point, I don't think they recognized who they had immediately, which is why he was actually sent into the bar the first time, into the polling place. So they beat him up, they drugged him. He was probably sick already. Again, look at his pictures. He's a frail dude. It probably didn't take much to create a medical emergency under that stress. They changed his clothes, they sent him in. From what I understand, they always sent somebody in with him. So what I believe happened is the Snodgrass or somebody who was there recognized him and said, "Hey, hey, Ed." And these guys went, "Uh-oh, we've been caught." But the damage was already done. And so that's why he really never went back in. We don't know how many times he went back in, but I think it was a combination of cooping, being kidnapped, beat up, drugged, alcohol. He probably did have some sort of an illness. It's the 1800s. Doctors weren't great. Um, so if you're a frail guy with possibly a heart condition or possibly with something else, that while that wasn't going to kill you, if you added more stress to it, it could. Um, I think it checks the boxes. I think Dr. Moran was probably a fan and liked the guy and didn't want to ruin his name. I don't think there was any weird thing with the doctor. I think his last words being changed tells you that. He made this big poetic scene of he said these
hmm
eloquent words as he died. And then the doctor saw there was a chance to make money. It doesn't make him ethically a good guy on that standpoint, but I don't think he went out to, you know, cover up something. I think Poe was already in bad shape when he got there, and that week leading in that he's missing, that did the damage. Because if you've been kidnapped and you're being cooped, you're not getting medical treatment. You're getting whatever's being tossed in your body. And to your point, he had issues with alcohol that may have been hereditary that could have given him serious issues. So I think that's what happened to him. And then you just have this series of people who liked him, who tried to look out for him without realizing that they made a bigger issue. And then people, because of celebrity, filled in the blanks. I'll say this though, If it is true that that is the case, he was murdered. So I believe he was murdered because today, if that was the case, you'd have had the police trying to find somebody who was responsible for his death.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe if you were looking at today, there would have been a serious police investigation that would have, turned these things under the rocks. I believe he was inadvertently murdered by these criminals who thought that they were going to get away with fixing an election, and a celebrity got caught up in it, and he got killed because health issues. And I don't think there was anything more to it. I think it's a little bit of pieces of everything. And once you start stacking all of them together, I think that adds in the pieces. That's just my opinion. You haven't heard it, so I want to hear what your thought is, and feel free to pick mine apart. But I'm curious to see where you jump to with this.
All right. Before I give my theory, I want to make sure that everyone knows here. Tony and I have been friends our entire life. We have very similar interests. We generally think a lot the same. We will, like, we were both thinking of the Office Rabies thing at the same time. And I want to tell everyone, we have not, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. We have not talked about this at all.
No, no.
I think it is a combination of multiple things. I think the
Fantastic.
cooping is 100% legitimate. And what really did it for me was knowing that he had this genetic condition to alcohol. I think this was a cooping gone wrong. They maybe saw him at the train station, and that would be a good place to find people to abduct, to do this. People in the area aren't going to know those people that are visiting from outside. So I think they kind of watched him, and that would explain where his stuff was. Once they find out, like you said, maybe they do eventually find out, oh my gosh, this is Edgar Allan Poe, and they dump his stuff. They get rid of it somehow, burn it, whatever. So I think, I feel like we're playing Clue right now. It's Colonel Mustard in the hall with the candlestick, but I think it was a combination of the cooping with the alcohol, especially if he's going into that pub to vote. Every time you're going in there, you're drinking alcohol. And I think and I agree, I think the doctor was probably a fan, really liked the celebrity of it, and was trying to save his reputation, which I think is completely possible. I mean, that still happens today. What do we say? Everyone's a saint when they're dead. You never talk about the bad things. So yeah, I think we're both in alignment on what we think happened. Now, of course, we'll never really know the truth, but I think out of all of these theories, a combination of these, and like you said, he could be sickly. He could have a heart problem that they never knew about. But I think it's a combination of those.
And again, to your point, we didn't talk. We didn't know what the other one was going to say, and we're going to continue that theme as we go through other topics. Because I'll guarantee you, there's going to be some when that doesn't happen that we're not going to agree.
Hopefully.
But I think it hopefully right. But it just checks the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think you got a murder case here, which is kind of
Yeah.
ironic for a guy that was such a macabre writer that
Oh yeah.
dealt in
It
that
was a
stuff.
perfect end for Edgar Allan Poe.
Right. It was a story. It was like one of his stories.
Oh yeah.
So here's the thing: we're never going to know. He's in an unmarked grave. They're not going to exhume the body. It's been 150 years, 60 years. I
Which,
don't think they're
how
going to.
weird is that? That he's in an unmarked grave. And
Yeah.
like 10 people showed up to his funeral. Like, How weird is that?
And I think it just plays to the sadness that the guy,
Yeah.
in looking him up, they always just said there was kind of a dark cloud and a sadness that kind of hung to him. You read his writings, there was a sadness and a dark cloud in his writings. The guy wasn't writing, friendly, kid stories. I mean,
No.
there's a reason that he was the first, I, I almost get the feeling like he was almost like the Stephen King of his time,
Yeah.
writing these
Yeah.
really dark stories. But I mean, how more appropriate? And the guy dies in October. Like, like you just, it's sadly perfect for him. But I do think, again, it was a combination of things where he was murdered by these guys, and
Hmm.
you're never gonna know. There's just no way. But yeah, it's interesting that we fell in line. So um, those are my closing thoughts on that one.
Yeah.
Um, it, it's interesting, and we're gonna go down some rabbit holes here going forward. So um, hopefully everybody enjoyed it. We want you to um, find us online. We've got a Facebook page. Jump on there, share your thoughts. Um, Tell us if we're crazy. Give us
Yeah.
give
I want
us
to
an
hear
opinion.
your
We
theories.
absolutely, and if you agree with us, great. If you don't, makes for even more fun. Because like we said in the beginning, there's no theory that's off the table. So if you do think it
Mm-mm.
was aliens or lizard people or Bigfoot, share that as well. you know,
It's always
um,
Bigfoot.
it's always Bigfoot, or it's always that blurry monster that's in the forest that nobody can get a clear picture of. That's the real monster
Right.
that's out there.
Right.
Um, but that's the case of Edgar Allan Poe's mysterious death. So another case closed, or maybe not. This is the Enigma Files, where every ending is just the start of another mystery. Remember to like the show, follow us, share it with a friend who likes a good mystery, and we're going to be coming back soon with another crazy, mysterious tale throughout history.
Can't wait.